Well, my friends, I watched just struck 158. Do you want to kick off this panel?
Tom here. I'm having lunch, so happy to.
Well, in that case, I'll send the first question to Adrian. Adrian, if you're still with us.
I'm still here, yeah.
So, Adrian, there were a lot of questions while you were speaking, and I wanted to get to them. You mentioned exit polls for donors. Some people were wondering what kind of questions you should ask on that survey. I'm wondering what you think there, and I'd love to hear what else Kivi and Tom think we should ask on those exit surveys. What are you thinking there?
Well, it's the list that I provided on the slide is probably a useful starting point. You can also pick up some tips on what to ask from my text on building donor loyalty. And also, to give Tom's book a plug as well, Keeping Your Donors. I mean, some of the ideas that he and Simon articulate in there will give you the basis for, thinking about what some of those options might be. And equally, it doesn't hurt to have an option at the end of that sort of list, other, pre-specify. And if there are specific things that have troubled somebody, then, you can bet that they'll let you know by filling that in. It's a very simple, questionnaire. It can be mailed, it can be emailed, or it might be that that it becomes part of a telephone script, where if you've rung people to reactivate them or try and reactivate their support, and they decline, that you have a very simple question there, which asks people, what the key reason is for that.
And Dana was wondering, when should you send out that exit survey? Is there a certain amount of time that should pass? And what happens if someone doesn't respond? Should you ask them multiple times, or should you just kind of let it go?
Well, in the context of cash, in the context of monthly, regular, or sustained giving, it'll be obvious when that person has terminated their support, because they will have cancelled the direct payment. And so the questionnaire can go out within a week or two of that occurring. It's trickier though, and I guess this is where the question's coming from. It's much trickier in the context of cash giving, where people send you checks, because they might miss a cycle of giving and yet still perceive that they're a supporter of the organisation. So there's no one right answer to that, but oftentimes organisations that do exit polling will do exit polling after about 18 months of not having had a gift from the organisation. I'll guarantee even then that there'll be one or two people who still thought that they were supporting you, but that's probably about as good a point as any in the great scheme of things to survey folks to see what the reason was. And then when you've got that data, you look for patterns in that to see if there are any service quality issues that need addressing. As I said in my presentation, not too much you can do about changes in their financial circumstances, but there may be things you can do about service quality issues that have caused them to terminate their support.
Great. Well, here's a question from Lisa, and Lisa directs that at all three of you, so I'm curious what all three of you think of this. And Kivi, maybe we can start with you. What top message would you give to the CEO and the board about their role in donor retention?
I'm not allowed to say it depends, right?
No, I think you can.
No. Don't be that consultant. Have a real one.
I'm not. I'll just say I'm not a huge fan of boards just willy-nilly getting involved in things, just because I've seen so many bad board members. Now, I'm obviously not a board development consultant, but if you have good board members who can tell your story very naturally, who aren't going to freak out because they can't remember a statistic or they can't remember what they're supposed to say, but, are good conversationalists, then I think getting those people out and really sort of talking to people and doing little mini focus groups, taking a couple of donors out to coffee or lunch or meeting with donors individually and really, being both not just the mouthpiece of the organization but the ears of the organization and really listening and bringing that back to staff, I think is a great role for board members. Now, not everybody is capable of doing that, even though it sounds fairly simple. So I think you have to customize your jobs for your board members.
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think about a piece of data offered the world by the revered Penny Burke, and it said that if you phone your new donor within 48 hours to thank that person without asking for a second gift, but just calling, you can leave a message, call a couple of times, that person is 4 times more likely to make a second gift. So it's well worth the tiny investment, and it's a great thing for board members to do. Because if you, I'm sure, look at your own giving and the behaviors that were triggered by that, what you will probably have personally witnessed is that absolutely nobody calls you to thank you. So the easiest way to distinguish your charity in a very, very crowded philanthropic marketplace with everybody banging on donors' doors so many times is to be the one out of 1,000, maybe one out of 10,000, who has a board member call and say, thank you for joining our donor family. You are so important to us.
Who has board members that will do things on 48 hours notice? I totally agree with you, Tom, but I mean, I think you have to find the right board member that is willing to do that.
Well, as you know, you're right, Kivi. The evidence is none too strong, but then again, my wife is the chair of a board that actually does that. So is it?
I can see Simone taking some out and making that happen. So, all right.
Oh, absolutely. No, but I mean, does it happen on planet Earth? Yes, it can happen on planet Earth. It can be done. Charities do this. They don't, though, mostly, and one has to wonder what purpose boards actually have. If they weren't required by the IRS, I wonder whether they would all just quietly evaporate as being utterly pointless. That is my personal opinion, of course.
What do you think, Adrian? What do you think CEOs and board members should do to help retention?
I think I entirely, first of all, agree with everything that Tom has just said. I mean, there's a lot of evidence kicking around just now that telephone welcomes are, particularly effective. Penelope Burke's work recently with Blackboard, for instance, highlighted, just what a difference that can make. And multiples of 4 or 5 times likely are the sorts of numbers that come out of those studies. So yeah, there's a cost to it in terms of people's time to make those phone calls, but they really do make a difference to subsequent retention. It's well worth considering that. Even if you've got to have a cut-off where gifts over a certain amount would trigger the making of phone calls. I think that's really key. The other thing, really, I'd say with boards is that they need to buy into the notion of lifetime value. I think sometimes with boards they kind of park their brains on the pavement before they get into go into the board meeting, because oftentimes a lot of those folks will have come from business backgrounds and they'll understand all about customer lifetime value. But you start to talk about donor lifetime value, and it's almost as if it's an alien concept. So some fundraisers I know have great difficulty convincing their boards to make an investment in donor retention or to make an investment in monthly giving, simply because the case for that is usually made on the lifetime value argument. And whilst in their business situations those board members will buy those arguments, sometimes it's a bit more of a struggle to get it across in a non-profit boardroom. So sometimes I feel like you want to give them a bit of a slap, really.
I'm all for slapping board members who aren't pulling their weight, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, here's one from Jennifer, and it was directed at Kivi, but I think everyone can answer it, and I know Tom has some strong feelings about tactics that nonprofits employ. Jennifer's wondering about your survey, Kivi, that it shows what nonprofits are doing, but in your opinion, are they doing the right things? Is the focus in the right place? Are you satisfied with those results of the data? What do you think there, Kivi? And I'm curious to see what Tom and Adrian think as well about lots of reports that come out in the nonprofit sector. It seems like lots of reports come out saying what people are doing, but are we really focusing on the right things?
I think when I look at the trends over the last 5 years, if you just want to talk purely tactically at this point, I don't think enough people are spending enough time on video. If we're just looking at communications channels, setting aside the strategy conversation for a moment, I think that's probably the one channel that I wish people would just accept and do more with, because it's so powerful and it can be used in so many different ways. So there's a lot of utility to video. I think the technology scares people off. I think they're, afraid about all the details about sound quality and lighting and all of that, and so I think people just can't deal with it. And I really believe that's why most people aren't using video like they should be. But just from like I said, a purely tactical point of view, I would love to see more nonprofits doing more with video.
What do you think, Tom? And I'm thinking specifically of social media. You and I were talking before we started. Maybe social doesn't have a whole lot of ROI, but it seems like lots of people are doing it, and more people are doing it every year. Are there things that maybe we shouldn't be worrying about as much as we are in your mind?
Yeah. Go back to the virtuous circle of donor communications. Ask me, thank me, report to me. You can do these through various channels, digital and print. Kivi's point about video is well made. We are in, I think it was 2005, was the watershed year. That was the year that the most common thing done on the internet was no longer Google searches. It became watching videos. So if you want to be part of the entertainment mix, the audience is already there. I think it's another thing Kivi is pointing out. You just aren't in front of that very well-primed audience. Now, of course, if you're doing cute puppy and kitten videos, then you're at the front of the line, and everybody will want to watch those. But do they make money? And I have to, I'm very clear in my recommendations. I don't care about anything unless it makes money. And it doesn't have to make it directly, like we can see a direct ROI from our Facebook time, but it has to at least justify the drain on my work time that is going to be involved. So, the fascination we all have now, and over 65, maybe 70% of Americans now have a mobile device. They're walking around staring at the palm of their hand. So we would say, oh, well, we must be on mobile. And the answer is, yeah, sort of. But if you start walking away from the tried and true, for instance, direct mail, which, as you saw from Kivi's numbers, is actually becoming more important to the charities than it has ever been in the past, and is an incredibly well-researched field, incredibly crowded field, incredibly expensive field, et cetera, et cetera. Everything has to be looked at. You have to consider your home page and your website to be the front of the store now, because so many people will, for instance, complete the gift that they were prompted to make by direct mail. They'll complete it online because it's a convenience factor for them. So many people will just stumble into your website because they've linked through for some reason. So many people will find you because they're looking for something, let's say school reform or adopt a pet or something. What is your website doing? I just had the unnerving experience of looking at about 24 websites as a clump because I happened to be speaking to these 24 organizations, and I was shocked because the homepage, probably state of the art for most of them, was a button that said donate. It's like, really, you think that's enough, huh? And then you jump to their landing page, and it all just went cold. It became very chilly in here. What am I looking at? A form. Fill in some data blanks. That is not a good customer service experience. I should be on fire when I'm making that gift. That's the moment when the chemical is released in my brain where the helping chemical comes out, makes me feel like I'm a good person, makes me feel all warm and rosy. And yet these websites universally almost were killing the urge, the impulse to join your family. So I think we've had print since Gutenberg, and we've had direct mail since the 1700s. So we have a lot of experience in how to make print work. We don't actually know all that much about the Internet and digital yet. It is a really infant marketing communications channel. Now, if you want a great book, it's not from the nonprofit world, which is one of the highest recommendations. It's from the commercial world where things actually have to work or you get fired. And that book is by Steve Krug, K-R-U-G. It's called Don't Make Me Think. And if you want to read one book, only one in your life, about internets and websites and how to make them work properly for your visitor and your consumer and your customer, which is your donor, then read Krug's book. It'll also make you laugh because he's pretty funny.
It's a great book. Tom sent it to me. I read it front to back, and I'm working on some of the suggestions on the Bloomerang website. I definitely recommend everyone read that. Adrian, what do you think? Are you seeing any fads out there that you think maybe nonprofits should not be worrying about too much or maybe focus too much on?
I think with the way I view a lot of the social media activity that's taking place right now is possibly a little different from my colleagues. I agree in the sense with Tom that it's not making a huge amount of money right now relative to other forms of fundraising, but I think that kind of misses the point a bit, because for me, that digital activity that organizations spend time doing is about developing those multiple engagements that I talked about in my presentation. So I'm not sure that the right way to think about social media is that they're going to raise you lots of money, so much as thinking that those are good ways of developing relationships that will ultimately raise you lots of money. And I think that possibly some of the metrics that we use right now in the digital space kind of underplay the utility of having a half-decent social media strategy, because actually, if people are engaging with you in lots of different ways, that will impact on the way in which you choose to give to the organization. May not be through social media, probably won't be. Maybe it'll be cutting a check or deciding that you're going to continue making your monthly gift. But, it has an important role in that kind of broader sense of donor engagement.
And I, of course, completely agree with what Adrian just said. I mean, it's really a way to help reinforce the trust and to really build the love. If a nonprofit can make me laugh about something I see on Facebook, then I'm instantly much more inclined to give to them next time they ask. So it's a complicated ecosystem in a lot of ways. And again, as a communications person rather than as a fundraising person, I look at it more broadly. I completely appreciate how Tom narrows the focus. But, I think all of you just need to sort of figure out where you are on that spectrum and what you're responsible for.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, and if you're spending more than 5% of your time on this stuff, you probably don't have your priorities actually worked out properly.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. I'm just going to keep going down the list of questions. We got here from one from Eric. Eric's wondering about appeals. Eric wants to do a print appeal. Is wondering about recommended length. It's a one-page good. Should it be multiple pages? What are some advice you would have, broadly, not just for Eric, but in your appeals, length, style, content? I know that Tommy shared some examples with us before, but I'm curious what the others think as well.
Okay, this is Kivi here. And,
I defer to Tom. I completely defer to Tom on print appeals, absolutely. I'll argue with him about email, but print, all Tom, all the way. Okay,
so this is Kivi, and the answer to that is different than you might think. See, it has nothing to do with the length, for instance, of a letter. People will argue, it should be a one-page letter, two-page, four-page, whatever. But it's not an argument, actually, not at least among direct mail professionals. Among direct mail professionals, they assume, because testing has shown it to be mostly always the case, that a properly written four-page letter will outpoll, bring in more money than a competing one-page letter. That said, you're not a professional direct mail writer. So if you cannot sustain the entertainment values across 4 pages as any well-regarded direct mail writer can, I mean, these people are writing at a very high level. They're writing to keep you involved. They are extraordinarily well trained. They use language the way a bullfighter uses the cape. It is not what the untrained can do. It has nothing to do with the length of the letter. It has to do with the quality of the writing. So if your writing isn't up to that professional standard, then make it as short as you can possibly make it, because more is not going to be better. Direct mail is actually a very simple medium. You only have a few things going on. You have to ask me for my help clearly so that I understand that's what you're coming to me for within seconds. It is not a reader's medium. It's a skimming medium. iMotion tests have shown clearly that people do not read in a kind of obvious fashion, starting at point A and moving to point B and to C and all the way through the alphabet. What they look at first is their own name, Dear Tom. What they look at second is who signed the letter. Now, that means the PS has high visual value because it's getting into their head very early. And Siegfried Vergla, who did the kind of foundational research for this stuff back over in Munich in the 80s, found that he called the PS the real first paragraph of a direct mail letter because that's what people were looking at so early. Then you go back, and in the transit back to the beginning of the letter, you're also looking for underlines. You're not actually looking for them. Your brain is not acknowledging their existence. Your brain notices anything that's different. And so the brain, through the eyes, sees the underline, sees the boldface, sees the bullet points, and will read them first. Ultimately, you go back to the beginning of the letter, and you start to read it. Now, if what you are given as a first paragraph is 50 words long, most likely, predictably, you will stop reading. So you're trained as a direct mail writer to start a direct mail letter when the brain is still pretty cold with a something like a 3-word statement or a 6-word statement, something so short it will go into your head without any resistance and without any mental labor. Then you can start to kind of lengthen your stride a little bit. But if you look at a professionally written direct mail letter that was successful, what you will see is that it often has nothing but 1-line, 2-line, and the occasional 3-line paragraph. Everything else is kept bloody short. It's a gift to you, Adrian, with white space around it because you need to make it a skimmable letter. It is not reading War and Peace. There you go.
Kivi, since you brought up emails, what do you think? Same question for emails. Length, style. A lot of those things I assume would carry over from what Tom said. But what should people keep in mind when doing an email appeal?
Well, that last thing that Tom said is absolutely true for email too. The incomplete sentence, the one sentence paragraph. You need a lot of those. Tom writes that way in direct mail, and you write that way in email appeals too. I think the overall length question is a different answer. You can have, as Tom is saying, 4-page, 6-page direct mail letters that are fabulous. You're not going to put, that quantity, 1,500 words or whatever, into an email. So if you look at most of what we see now that's working, yes, there are always going to be 2-sentence emails that raise money, and there are going to be emails that are 1,000 words that raise money. But the ones that are, most of them that are raising most of the money in email are somewhere between 200 and 400 words. So, you get to the point very quickly, lots of short sentences, short paragraphs, multiple places for people to click, just like the examples I showed you before. Single focus. Anytime you're asking people to do things online, don't ask them to do 15 things in one email. Ask them to do one thing in the email.
Yeah, this is Kivi again. I want to reinforce what the other Kivi just said, which there's a great idea that was brought into our world by a guy named Jonathan Grapsis down in Australia, and he created an acronym that is the word SMIT, S-M-I-T, all caps. And what that stands for is single most important thing I have to tell you today in this letter. The SMIT concept has saved my life many, many, many times because we tend to start wandering, packing a little more of this, packing a little more of that. A lot of times we're talking about our programs. Oh, by the way, here's another crazy name program we forgot to mention. And these things do not persuade people to give. You are coming to them, and there are only 2 kinds of letters that I'm aware of as a direct mail writer. You have either story letters, where you're trying to break somebody's heart over your knee, and these stories have to be very focused. They're about one person in a tough situation, and they get saved thanks to your help, or they are offer letters. So you only have story letters and you have offer letters. When you have offer letters, then the SMIT idea really kicks in because you just are saying one thing. We have a matching gift offer, for instance. If you send $1 now, it becomes $2 worth of help. And that has to be said over and over and over and over. And that's the only thing, in essence, that you're actually saying in that letter. So, from my experience as a writer of these things, it's just become simpler and simpler over time to create effective, working direct mail because I know I only have to put one thought in your head. And when you think about it that way, throwing in all sorts of other stuff like visit our website to see the video, or if you want information about our planned giving program, check this box too. All that stuff is noise. It's underbrush. You want to clear it out because you have this one job that direct mail appeal is supposed to be doing. And it's the same. In some ways, I think it's the same for email. You have one job that you're supposed to be doing.
Well, that advice. I want to leave Adrian if I can. I know, Adrian, you have some strong feelings on the content of acknowledgement letters. I remember seeing you speak at an AFP group a couple of years ago, talking about how most acknowledgments, read like a letter that maybe a kid would send to his grandma after the holidays. What advice would you have for style and content on the thank you? Assuming everyone follows Kivi and Tom's great advice on the appeal.
Tom mentioned in his presentation a website that, again, I would entirely endorse. Lisa Sargeant, who is absolutely no relation to me, I think, is probably one of those people who do thank you letters particularly well. and you can visit her website and read about her work. The other place you can go is to Cambernet Sophie, the www.sofii.org, which is the showcase of fundraising innovation. And on that website, if you search for Lisa Sargeant, you can see some really great examples of kind of before and after what she's done with thank you letters. Tom's website, there are lots of examples of kind of before and after, the work that Tom's been doing. But if you have a look at Lisa's work on the Sophie website, you'll see how she transforms thank you letters. And her thesis is really that these things are dreadfully dull. We know that donors look for the thank you letter, and they see it as being one of the most important communication they receive from an organization. But most donors think they're terrible. And that's because they're formulaic. Dear Mr. Jones, thank you so much for your kind and generous gift of $300 to support the great work of our tremendous charity. That's boring. They're singularly unmemorable. And so writing something that is personalized, something that is distinct, and heaven forbid, it had a bit of humor in it, that would be memorable, I think is really a smart thing to do. But I'm an academic, not a copywriter. I would go to one of the websites that I mentioned and see other professionals do it.
Always a good idea, for sure. Tom, what do you think about acknowledgments? Anything you might add to Adrian's comments on following up, saying thank you?
Yeah. Your mother taught you to be grateful. When did this go out of fashion? The level of thank yous I get from my own, gifts to charities range, of course. There's the robot that writes the quick, instant thank you once I've made a gift online. And they vary, mostly not in the right direction. Mostly they talk about themselves. I urge you, please don't hear it once and forget it, which you will. Most of this will be out of your brain by tomorrow, replaced by other things. But every communication with your donor is a customer service experience, and it should be a surprising customer service experience. And the reason it should be surprising is that they don't expect that. And you're trying to exceed expectations all the time, if possible. What they expect is the robot. What they expect is the formulaic that Adrian just, it was a parody, except that it's not a parody. It is how 99% of these things sound. Well, you don't want to sound like everybody else. That's basic marketing. You should be different. You should be unique. Why is Charity Water such an amazingly successful? It's not just because of their, stupid pledge that they spend 100% of your charity dollar on projects rather than on administration, which is just, different argument. But it's because their communications are great. They are fun. They're interesting. Go to YouTube, look at what they did as a thank you a few years ago on the anniversary they were having. It was just a scream, and it's so, the production values are great, of course. They're sort of working on the Hollywood side of the street. But, we are not, nobody is in the business of boring people to death. David Ogilvy, great ad guy, he's the true madman, and he said he built his agency on one concept: you will never bore someone into buying a product or service. And yet charities seem to feel that they will bore people into being part of the family, the tribe, the cause, the movement, whatever it is they're putting on offer. That is not good marketing. Good marketing is constantly refreshed and surprising. Thank me in a way I've never seen in my life.
Good
Can I add one thing to that?
Please.
I think so many times people write the thank you letter as if it's just the end of the transaction. and instead include something about what's happening next to really set that up as a relationship. So tell them when they're going to get the newsletter. Tell them about what's happening next that they might want to be involved in. Some of you need volunteers, some of you don't. Mention a few of these things so that they understand that you're seeing it as a relationship, that you're welcoming them into the family and not just giving them a receipt.
Yeah, this is the other Kivi, and I just want to talk about that because that's an important note. The charities tend to see thank yous as closing the relationship. In other words, the charity got what it wanted, which is a check, and now we're going to thank you and we're done. Well, that's actually not how the donor sees it. They see the thank you as the beginning of something, not the end of something. Your focus on the transaction as a nonprofit is kind of sapping the life out of the fact that the thank you actually is the beginning of something, a whole year of relationship building, not the end of the thing you got that you wanted is now done. You've got their money, and now you can forget about it.
Great advice. We said we'd go to about 2:45, and there's two questions, one from Michelle and one from Carolyn, that I definitely want to get to. Here's Michelle. She's got a real-life problem that she needs your expert help with. Michelle says that her org is 2 years new to fundraising, and this year they implemented their first year-end appeal. It was a storytelling letter with all the right elements, she says, and it was sent out to 3,000 members of the family. This is a boys and girls club, by the way. It went out to parents of the kids in their program and a few past donors. And out of the 3,000, she only got 12 replies. She says it was their first year-end appeal ever, and she thinks maybe it was because the parents aren't used to being asked by the organization. They had never gotten an appeal from them. What advice would you have to Michelle for getting a better response rate? Do you think it's because it was the first appeal? What are you thinking there? And Tom, maybe I'll start with you.
Actually, and this is the sad truth of direct mail. First of all, I understand that the story is there and so forth. There's a lot that can go wrong with direct mail. It is a little bit by it's kind of like Swiss watches. Really, all you want is for it to accurately tell the time, but in order for that to happen, it has all these, diamonds and gears and all this, the rest of the stuff happening inside. Actually, so she mailed the 3,000, she gets 16. I just did the math. That looks to me, if I haven't screwed up the math, as a 0.5% response. And that, here's the good news, that's actually not unsuccessful. This is the world direct mail lives in. Yeah, sure, you'd like more. You got problems there because you're mailing to parents. Now, I work with Boys and Girls Clubs. I've worked with a number of them. And often the kids they're serving are poor kids. Therefore, they're from families that really don't have a lot of surplus income and to give to something. And I'm thinking of the Boys and Girls Club in the capital city of my state, Rhode Island, in Providence. And, they're charging those kids like a $25 membership fee, but it actually costs the club something like $1,000 per kid to service the child. And the parents are at the low end of the income spectrum. They're not giving money. They are being served by the club. The best people, every charity should have a natural constituency. That is to say, there probably is a natural constituency. For Boys and Girls Club, it has always been the alumni. But that said, the alumni are hard to find. So, for instance, I know that a club up here in Pawtucket started years ago at our suggestion, actually, the fundraiser's suggestion, having an annual alumni event during the summer when it's fun to be outside, where you can roast hot dogs and all the rest of it, have a ball game, whatever. And you just start to beat the bushes. It doesn't matter where you were an alum for the Boys and Girls Club. You're invited to this open event. Come, have fun, eat, laugh, share, learn what we do. And this club went from almost destitution and financial collapse to they are now building a brand new club building. And over the years, they have started to assemble their alumni base. Why is it that colleges, they may screw everything else up, but they know exactly where all their alumni live? Because that's their natural constituency. They have to know who those people are. They have to stay in touch with them. Raising money for a Boys and Girls Club should be one of the easier tasks on earth, and yet it is not. There are many reasons. Feel free to give me a call sometime. We can have a big, long chat on the back porch. But that is, your direct mail didn't fail. Your direct mail did what a decent, piece of direct mail should do in acquisition mode. The numbers are just hard to work with. You start at the low end and you gather them in and you hug them tight and you love them to death. Those 16 people should be getting a phone call every week from some board member or a club kid saying, thank you for being a supporter. End of story.
So the good news is that was actually a pretty good response rate. And I think Michelle's the question behind the question was the board doesn't seem to want to do another direct mail campaign because of that response rate. But maybe they're just not aware that, hey, that was a pretty good conversion rate. That was actually pretty successful.
I'll go back to boards. They don't mostly know what they're doing. They have, if it would shock me to find anybody on most nonprofit boards who has even had faint contact with the real world of direct mail. So how would they know whether that was a success or not? Fundraisers should know. That direct mail is a basic tool. If you don't know what a success rate is, then you need to read a book. You need to read either Alan Sharp's book, Mail Superiority, forgive the stupid pun, or you might want to read Mal Warwick's latest edition of How to Write Successful Appeals. But, you can't do direct mail by thinking about it with your big brain and not having any real knowledge. It just cannot be done.
And Kivi, you're a metrics-driven person. What are good response rates for things like email and digital campaigns? Maybe some people are in a similar boat where they're getting what looks like low numbers, but actually might be pretty good.
There are actually a couple of decent metric reports available. Blackbaud does one every year. M&R does one every year with N10. I would just go download those. If you just, Google nonprofit online fundraising metrics or trends, the reports will come up. Like a lot of people freak out because their open rate is only 10, 15, 20%. Well, that's pretty typical. Yeah. And, other people are reading that email. What you can measure technically is not actually what's happening in the real world, right? Like more than 20% are actually looking at that thing, but that's only what can be counted.
Right. Well, we've probably got time for one more question, and it was a question from Carolyn Davis that I was kind of saving till the end. And Carolyn, since you're going to be our last question, I'm going to send you a copy of that book by Roger Craver, so I'll get your contact info a little later on. But Carolyn's been asking this, and a lot of other people have been asking, and I thought it would be a good way to end, just to get an answer from all three of you. You're a new nonprofit, you're a startup nonprofit, maybe a couple weeks old, a couple months old. What are the top three things that organization can do to really be successful? And I won't qualify it by strategies or anything. Just what do you guys think that a nonprofit should focus on first and foremost when they are brand new? And Adrian, why don't we have you go first?
So I was just coming off mute there. Well, I mean, in a startup situation, you're going to go for what's probably going to be the easiest sources of income first. So if you're in the happy position of providing products and services from the organization that are likely to be funded from trusts and foundations, then that would be the obvious route to start. And I say that because the return that you get from that kind of fundraising is pretty good. Oftentimes the deadline to grant applications are, sometime over the next few months, which means you'll get the money in quicker. And foundations oftentimes will help you to start something up. They're less keen in long-term relationships, but they will think about helping you get an organization off the ground and kick-starting something that you can fund later through other techniques. The other thing that I would kind of advocate early on is to assess the relationships that you have in the organization. They might be relationships from the board to potential donors, or from volunteers to potential donors, or from even members of the staff team that might know people who have a genuine passion for what the organization is doing. So a quick early appraisal of the potential for major gift income to that organization is one of the things I would do. Because again, you might find one or two individuals that are willing to help you get that off the ground and provide some funding that will get you started, give you a bit of breathing space. Only after that would I start to do some of the more difficult stuff. Trying to get support from corporate organizations, I think, generally speaking, I know there are always exceptions, but generally speaking is a longer-term proposition. And if you're going to do anything through traditional direct response media like direct mail, well, boy, that's going to be a very long-term proposition, because it's probably going to be 18 months or 2 years before you begin to break even on those programs. So in a sense, you've got to have enough capital kicking around from the get-go to be able to make those things successful. The other thing I'll do, and I'm sure Kivi's going to say this in just a second, is that I would make sure that I had a half-decent website and that I used one of the online providers to facilitate people to make online donations, because that's a very easy, simple thing you can do early on. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, and probably within the first few months, if you are able to attract supporters, you should be able to provide them with a basic form of communication digitally, because it's not going to cost you a huge sum of money. And at that point, I'll shut up and see what everybody else thinks.
What do you think, Tom? Top 3 things a new nonprofit should do.
Well, they should have had a business plan, so they have some idea of where the money to support this and sustain it is supposed to come from. I've watched more than my share of nonprofits collapse. New ideas, great vision, and yet they didn't make it to the finish line. And a lot of times it comes down to boards not understanding what we in our industry call the culture of philanthropy. In other words, you don't really have a sense of why donors matter. All they are is cash cows to you. And so I think I would work on that first. Now, I've been advising actually a rather large organization that's getting into fundraising. They're already a $30 million operation, but they now see the need for fundraising. And they have 2 consultants working on this. I'm doing the communications part. And our estimate was it would take them 3 to 5 years to have their fundraising program up and running and producing dependable income that was projectable in a budget. And so nonprofits get started with passion, but passion isn't paying the bills. And if you don't have a plan, then you don't have anything. And part of having a plan is, if we're going to have individual donors, we're going to need to be in touch with those people at least once a month if possible. So, the first thing I do with a new client like this one is we talk about how many times they're going to appeal in a year, how many times they're going to try to acquire new donors in a year, how many times they're going to report back to those donors in a year, thank yous are given, what they're going to do with their website, and so forth. So we're moving towards board, we're trying to move toward, in the first year, 12 contacts with donors and also trying to bring in new donors through prospecting and acquisition. It's not easy to do this stuff. So, pretending that this can be done by people without training is just delusional. You have to have a plan and work the plan and, go to as few meetings as possible because they're just a time suck and get the job done.
What do you think, Kivi? It doesn't necessarily have to be a brand new startup, even a newer nonprofit, maybe just a young nonprofit, 1 year old. What should they be focusing on? What are you seeing out there?
Well, from the marketing perspective, everything comes back to 3 basic questions. And I think especially when you're starting out, the quicker you can get clarity on your answers to those 3 questions, the better off you're going to be. So the first one is, who are we trying to talk to? You can call that your target audience, your community, your network, however you want to define it. But get away as quickly as possible from this idea that you're reaching out to the general public, because you're not, and it's very expensive, and not everybody cares about what you do, and they never will. So you need to figure out who your people are, who are the people that are most likely to lean your way. Sometimes that's demographics. Sometimes it's things like Tom referred to earlier. We call that tribe sometimes. It's their affinity for whatever it is that you're working on. But you need to understand at some level who those people are, and then, number 2, create the message to them. So what is it? And I often encourage nonprofits to focus on call to action because I think it helps get clarity about message quicker. And so giving is going to be one call to action. But what else do you want people who share your values to do to bring about the change in the world that you're trying to bring about? And what's going to be most meaningful to those people about the work you're doing? That should be the central part of your message. So you're defining who your people are, you're figuring out what you want to say to them, and then the third question is how you actually communicate that, which channels you pick. And nonprofits always want to go to the third question, what should be on my homepage? Should I be on Facebook? Do I have to do Twitter? And my response to that is always, tell me about who you're trying to reach and tell me about what you're trying to say to those people. You have to answer the first 2 questions before you can have a real serious conversation about the third, about the tactics. Now, that said, I would say that all of you need a website. And you all need to have a Facebook presence, even if it's pretty minimal, because it's a sign that you're credible. If I can't find you online, you don't exist. I'm sorry. You're not worth me giving you any money or any time. So you have to crack that nut pretty quickly. And you can get a pretty easy, decent-looking website in a couple of hours yourself on WordPress if you have to. You can set up the Facebook page, throw up a couple of pictures, put up a couple of posts, at least get the presence there so that when people are trying to make sure you're legit, they see something.
Excellent. Great advice. Thank you both, or thank you all 3 of you so much. We're getting a lot of comments here in the chat room, people thanking you. This was awesome. I'm just so inspired by all the great advice I've heard over the last 3.5 hours or so. I hope the 3 of you had as much fun as I did and the listeners did. So thank you, all 3 of you.
Thank you for hanging in there, Stephen, and not just, kicking us all to the curb at one point there.
No, I would never dream of it. And thanks everyone for hanging in there. I know we had those technical stumbles. We got over them. I'm so glad we did. And I can't wait to do this again next year. This is something that we want to do every year. Hopefully we'll come back for BloomCon 2016 next January. We'd love to hear your feedback, and obviously the technical gaps go without saying, but for those of you who listened, I'd love to know what you thought about the format, the speakers, if maybe there were other topics that you would want to hear about. Please let me know. You will not hurt my feelings whatsoever. Check out the feedback form. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to let the panelists have the last word, and we can start with Kivi since she had to answer that question last, just tell folks where they can learn more about you, where they can connect with you online, and keep the conversation going.
Our website is nonprofitmarketingguide.com, and you can find all kinds of free downloads. We make you register for some of them, not for others. We do a weekly newsletter that usually comes out on Wednesdays. We blog Monday through Friday, and we connect you to lots of other people like Tom. Tom does his fundraising academy at Nonprofit Marketing Guide, and we're very happy to be his online home.
And Tom, other than that awesome website, where can people find you?
Well, I have a website, Ahern, AHERN.com, COMM.com. And if you go there, you can subscribe to the e-newsletter, and that'll give me a chance to shout in your ear every couple of weeks or so. Try to keep it interesting. And otherwise, it's been a pleasure, actually, having such a great, big, vast audience and all your wonderful questions to play around with. And don't criticize Kivi; she's hypersensitive. But Adrian and I are both can take it, so feel free. And,
I can take it.
Yeah, I know you can. All right. Anyway, Adrian. And Adrian's, it's actually 11 o'clock at night over where he is.
Poor Adrian.
Probably asleep by now.
I think he's still with us. Are you still there, Adrian? If not, I'll speak for him.
I have this. Well, I could do this cute British accent.
Oh yes, Tom, you must. Please do.
Yes, you were playing me earlier, so now play Adrian, please.
Yeah, we're recording, so this will be kept forever. Just so you know.
Yeah. Oh well. Okay. So anyway, thank you all, and I don't have a cute British accent. I'm sorry. I wish I did. I can do Scottish.
I wish you did too.
Yeah, me too. Okay.
Well, just a final thanks to everyone for hanging out, sticking with us, and for participating. It was great to see the discussions there in the chat room. This doesn't have to be your last foray into Bloomerang educational resources. We've got our daily blog. We actually do a webinar every Thursday. Next Thursday webinar is on the 29th. We're going to have Shannon Doolittle, who actually, she's awesome. I know, Tom, you referenced her in your slides. She's going to talk about stewardship. So register for that. It'll be totally free and fully educational. You can see some more webinars there on our webinar page. We've got a few scheduled, actually up through July, so you may find something there that you're interested in. Love for you to check us out. Again, my thanks to everyone involved. This was so much fun. I can't wait to receive your feedback. Please do not be shy about doing that. You can see everyone's slides on the BloomCon page. I just sent that link out through the chat box there. And that's it. We'll call it a day there. I'm going to be in touch very soon to everyone who hung out with us, and I can't wait to talk to you all again. So have a great rest of your afternoon, and we will see you very soon. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.